The Sioux developed innovations in everything from agriculture to diplomacy that historians are still documenting today. Yet their most significant contributions to history remain largely unknown outside academic circles. What aspects of their civilization have been overlooked in mainstream narratives? Well, let's start with this. The Sioux tribe has been living with the wrong name for centuries. It's like your enemies giving you a nickname and having everyone else think that's your real name. The word Sioux came from their rivals, the Ojibwe people, who used a word that basically meant little snakes or enemies. The people we call Sioux never called themselves that at all. They had three beautiful names: Dakota, Lakota, and Nakota. All three words mean friend or ally. Each name represented a different dialect group within the same big family. Dakota lived in the east, the Lakota claimed the west. The Nakota settled in between. They could all understand each other, but each group had their own customs and territories. It's like different families who speak the same language, but have completely different recipes for the same dish. European explorers heard the Ojibwe word and just ran with it. They never bothered to ask what these people actually called themselves. For hundreds of years, history books used this enemy word to describe them. Today, many people from these tribes prefer their original names. They're taking back their identity from that old misunderstanding. The confusion over names was just the beginning of how much outsiders misunderstood these remarkable people. These Dakota, Lakota, and Nakota people controlled more land than most countries today. We're talking about territory that stretched across more than 10 modern U.S. states. Originally, they lived near the Great Lakes, but around the 1600s, conflicts and trade opportunities pushed them westward. They basically managed one of history's greatest moves, except instead of hiring a moving truck, entire nations packed up and walked for generations. The Black Hills became their most sacred place. They believed their people were born there. These weren't just pretty mountains. They were literally the birthplace of their entire civilization. Here's the incredible part. They navigated this massive territory without any maps. They used rivers as highways, mountains as landmarks, and constellations as guides. Different groups would spread out across hundreds of miles, but they always knew exactly where they were. Their movement patterns followed the buffalo. When herds moved north in spring, the people followed. Following buffalo across the plains was like having a really large, really hairy tour guide who never got lost. Their mastery of this vast land was impressive, but their next breakthrough would change everything. When horses arrived in the 1700s, everything changed for the Dakota, Lakota, and Nakota people. Before horses, they traveled on foot and used dogs to pull their belongings. They went from walking everywhere to suddenly having four-legged speed machines. They called horses holy dogs, which tells you how special these animals were. Children learned to ride around age 4 or 5, riding bareback without reins, learning to move as one with their horses. The impact on hunting was incredible. Before horses, hunting buffalo meant dangerous chases on foot. With horses, a skilled rider could keep up with a running buffalo and escape if things went wrong. Warfare changed completely too. Enemy tribes went from dealing with foot soldiers to suddenly facing warriors who moved like lightning. Horse raids became the ultimate test of bravery. Young warriors would sneak into enemy camps at night and steal horses. Success in horse stealing was basically the ancient equivalent of earning your driver's license and getting your first car all at once. The horses were treated like family members, painted and decorated for ceremonies. Warriors shared their food and water with horses during long journeys. But while they were revolutionizing transportation, these people had already developed a unique way of preserving their most important memories. While other cultures were writing books, the Dakota, Lakota, and Nakota people created something different: winter counts. These were living libraries painted on buffalo hides that told the story of entire generations. Each year, the tribe chose the single most important event that happened. Think of it as creating the world's first annual highlight reel, except it covered everything that shaped a people's destiny. One person became the keeper of the winter count. They had to remember not just the pictures, but all the stories behind them. They passed down centuries of history using only painted symbols and memory. The winter counts were drawn in spiral patterns. Each simple symbol represented an entire year's worth of stories. A man with spots might represent the year smallpox came through. Some winter counts go back over 250 years. It's like having multiple witnesses all telling the same story, except these witnesses never talked to each other and lived hundreds of miles apart. But these master storytellers were also running sophisticated business operations. Everyone thinks of the Dakota, Lakota, and Nakota as fierce warriors, but many were brilliant traders who built networks that would make modern businesses jealous. They basically created the first Continental delivery service, except everything moved on horseback and dog sleds. Their networks stretched from the Great Lakes to the Rocky Mountains, from Canada to Mexico. Spanish goods from the Southwest would end up with French traders in the Great Lakes, all passing through these Native American networks. They controlled exclusive access to valuable resources. The sacred pipestone quarries were theirs alone. This red stone was essential for ceremonial pipes, and every tribe wanted it. The clever part was their use of sign language. Plain sign language became the universal business language. A Dakota trader could negotiate with different groups all in the same day using hand signals. It was like having Google Translate, except it was all done with hands and worked perfectly every time. Trade gatherings weren't just business. They were major social events where tribes arranged marriages and shared news. Music played a huge role in these gatherings, just like it did in every aspect of their culture. Music wasn't background entertainment for the Dakota, Lakota, and Nakota people. It was the heartbeat that kept their entire civilization in sync. Every activity had its own musical category. War songs, healing songs, love songs, mourning songs. It was like having a specialized playlist for every human experience, except these playlists could literally save lives. The instruments were made from nature. Drums from buffalo hide, flutes from wood or bone, rattles from gourds. Everything was handcrafted from the world around them. Most songs came from dreams and visions. People would have spiritual experiences where complete songs would come to them fully formed. The Lakota love flute let young men express feelings they couldn't put into words. It was the world's first long-distance relationship technology, except it required actual musical talent. Songs were owned like property. Some songs were so powerful, only certain people could sing them at certain times. Their musical knowledge connected to something even more sophisticated, their understanding of cosmic patterns. The Dakota, Lakota, and Nakota people used the night sky like a cosmic calendar, navigation system, and spiritual guide all combined. They basically turned the entire universe into their personal scheduling app. According to their beliefs, their people came from the stars and would return there after death. The stars weren't distant lights, but relatives and ancestors watching over them. The Black Hills lined up perfectly with important constellations they studied closely. They timed major ceremonies with star movements and lunar cycles. Even everyday decisions like when to plant, hunt, or move camp were influenced by what was happening in the sky. The racetrack, what we call the Milky Way, represented the path souls took to the afterlife. Think of it as the ultimate highway system, except it was designed for spirits traveling between worlds. Different star patterns told them when seasons would change and when animals would migrate. They could predict weather months in advance just by watching the sky. But while mastering heavenly patterns, they had practical concerns about shelter on Earth. Not every Dakota, Lakota, and Nakota family lived in teepees year-round, but those who did had perfected brilliant portable housing. They created what was basically a high-tech mobile home, except it was made from natural materials and set up faster than most camping tents. In colder regions, some groups built earth lodges for winter, but the teepee was the real engineering marvel. These were sophisticated structures designed to handle prairie tornadoes and perfect temperature control. The ventilation system was genius. Smoke rose up and out through the top, but rain couldn't get in. Women owned the teepees. They designed, built, decorated, and were responsible for setting them up and taking them down. A skilled team could disassemble a large teepee, travel miles, and have their new home ready before sunset. These women could pack and move an entire house faster than most people today can fold a fitted sheet. The interior layout followed strict spiritual rules, specific spots for elders, family areas, and places for ceremonial objects. The decorations told family stories or came from visions, but beyond practical skills, these people had developed an impressive leadership system. The Dakota, Lakota, and Nakota people figured out how to choose leaders who actually deserved to lead. They created the exact opposite of every greedy politician you've ever seen. Leaders weren't born into power or the richest people. They were chosen based on character, wisdom, and generosity. The best leaders gave away more than they kept. They understood that different situations needed different leaders. War chiefs for conflicts, peace chiefs for daily affairs, ceremonial leaders for spiritual matters. Women, especially older women, had enormous influence over major decisions. The leadership style was completely different. Boasting was negative. Quiet strength was what people respected. Humility was like a leader's secret weapon. The more they had, the more powerful they became. This system was designed to survive anything, which turned out to be exactly what was needed. Today, Dakota, Lakota, and Nakota people live across multiple reservations, and they're not just surviving, they're thriving. They basically performed the ultimate disappearing act, except instead of vanishing, they made their oppressors' plans disappear. After centuries of policies designed to erase their culture, boarding schools that forbade languages, laws that banned ceremonies, they're still here, still speaking their languages, still practicing traditions. Language revitalization is happening everywhere. Immersion schools where children learn everything in Dakota, Lakota, or Nakota. It's like watching languages come back from near extinction, except they never actually died. They just went underground. Old ceremonies are still practiced. Modern leaders are active in land rights, climate change, and cultural preservation. They've adapted new tools to serve old purposes. Social media spreads languages. Modern schools teach traditional knowledge. Artists blend ancient symbols with current techniques. Despite broken treaties, stolen land, and banned languages, the essential spirit of being Dakota, Lakota, or Nakota proves stronger than any force trying to destroy it. You think you know the Cherokee story? You don't. What they built, how they lived, and what they survived will completely change how you see American history. These aren't just random facts. They're secrets that reveal a civilization far more advanced than anyone ever told you. Let's start with something practical, something that moves. When you think of boats, you probably picture something made in a factory with fiberglass and engines. The Cherokee had a different idea. They turned massive trees into floating vehicles that could carry families, trade goods, and everything else they needed to survive. Building a canoe from scratch sounds harder than assembling furniture without the manual. The Cherokee started by selecting the perfect tree. Tulip poplar was their favorite choice because it grew straight and tall. The process began with controlled burning. They'd start a fire on top of the fallen log and carefully tend it to burn away the wood inside. Some Cherokee canoes stretched over 20 feet long and could easily fit multiple people plus their belongings. These boats were basically the pickup trucks of the river world. If pickup trucks took months to build and never needed gas. Rivers like the Tennessee and Hiwassee became their highways. These weren't just boats, they were lifelines that connected entire communities. But these waterways did more than just move people and goods. Your last name today might tell people where your family came from. For the Cherokee, your clan wasn't just part of your identity. It was the rule book for your entire life. 7 clans divided Cherokee society, and whichever one you belonged to determined who you could marry and how legal disputes would be handled. Being sorted into a clan was like getting assigned to a team that you could never leave or change. The Wolf clan produced many warriors. The Deer clan members often became fast runners and hunters. Your clan was basically your permanent friend group, complete with built-in responsibilities and a strict no-dating policy within the group. Children automatically belonged to their mother's clan, not their father's. Marriage rules were strict. You absolutely could not marry anyone from your own clan, and your clan could literally save your life. During warfare, clan members had obligations to protect each other, even from different settlements hundreds of miles apart. The whole system was like having a built-in social network with both privileges and serious responsibilities. Yet even this complex social organization was about to evolve into something completely unprecedented. While most Native American tribes operated under traditional leadership, the Cherokee did something shocking in 1827. They wrote down a constitution with separate branches and defined citizen rights. The Cherokee basically invented their own version of democracy while most of the world was still figuring out if kings were necessary. Their constitution established 3 branches: legislative, executive, and judicial. Citizens could vote for representatives and chiefs, creating accountability. They had campaign seasons and political debates before most places even had regular elections. Talk about being ahead of the curve. Written laws replaced oral traditions that had governed Cherokee society for centuries. The really mind-blowing part? This wasn't just copying European ideas. The Cherokee Constitution included concepts that wouldn't appear in mainstream American politics for decades, but this impressive government needed a proper home to operate from. Most people imagine Native American settlements as traditional dwellings scattered through forests. New Echota looked more like a miniature Washington, D.C. The Cherokee designed their capital city to showcase political sophistication. Walking through New Echota in the 1830s would have been like stepping into the future. The city featured planned streets in a grid pattern. Government buildings included a Supreme Court where Cherokee justices heard appeals. They had street lamps when most frontier towns were still using torches and hoping for the best. Street lighting set New Echota apart from frontier communities. Oil lamps illuminated thoroughfares after dark. And the real showstopper was the Supreme Court building itself. Cherokee architects designed it with columns and formal architecture. The print shop produced the Cherokee Phoenix newspaper in both Cherokee and English. New Echota was basically the Cherokee version of a modern capital city, complete with newspapers and better urban planning than most places had. Unfortunately, all this progress was about to be tested by forces beyond Cherokee control. Being the perfect neighbor didn't save the Cherokee from betrayal. They had helped during emergencies, adopted similar customs, and fought alongside their neighbors. Then, those same neighbors decided they had to leave anyway. The Cherokee had bent over backwards to prove they could coexist peacefully. During the War of 1812, Cherokee warriors fought alongside American forces. They adopted European-style farming, attended mission schools, and some converted to Christianity. They basically became model citizens before the concept of model citizens was even invented. The Cherokee signed treaties with the United States that recognized their land rights. Then Andrew Jackson became president, and the rules changed overnight. The Indian Removal Act passed despite fierce Cherokee opposition. The Cherokee won their case in the Supreme Court. Jackson's response was basically telling the Supreme Court to go pound sand. Federal marshals didn't arrive to protect Cherokee rights. It was like winning a game and then having the other team change the rules after the final whistle. What happened next would become one of the darkest chapters in American history. 4,000 deaths gives you some idea of the scale. The Trail of Tears wasn't just a difficult journey. It was a disaster that destroyed families and communities. The forced removal began in 1838 with military efficiency. Federal troops surrounded Cherokee communities with minimal warning. Families were given minutes to gather belongings before being marched to holding camps. It was like the world's worst moving day, except you couldn't hire professionals and had no choice in the matter. 16,000 Cherokee were forced to walk over 800 miles during one of the harshest winters on record. Government contractors delivered spoiled meat, moldy flour, and contaminated water. Some simply stole supplies meant for Cherokee families. The government contractors made used car salesmen look honest by comparison. Disease spread rapidly. Dysentery, typhus, and pneumonia killed hundreds. Family separation added psychological trauma. Children became separated from their parents. Elderly Cherokee who couldn't keep up were sometimes left behind. But while this tragedy unfolded, some Cherokee had already put a different plan into action. While federal troops rounded up Cherokee families, several hundred Cherokee executed one of the most daring escape plans in American history. They disappeared into the rugged Smoky Mountains, gambling on survival and hiding rather than facing the deadly journey west. These weren't random people who got lucky. This was coordinated resistance. Cherokee leaders planned escape routes into the most remote terrain. Deep forests, hidden valleys, and mountain caves became temporary homes. They basically became the ultimate off-grid community before anyone knew what off-grid meant. They survived by hunting small game, gathering wild plants, and growing crops in tiny clearings. The mountain Cherokee developed survival skills that would make any wilderness expert jealous. These folks were practicing extreme social distancing decades before it became trendy, except their version actually saved lives. But hiding forever wasn't realistic. The solution came through a legal loophole. A white trader had purchased land and allowed Cherokee families to live there. Gradually, the hidden Cherokee emerged and established what became the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians. Surviving in those mountains required skills their ancestors had perfected long before any of these political troubles began. Long before dealing with removal policies, the Cherokee had perfected a hunting weapon that was both simple and remarkably effective. The blowgun represented thousands of years of ingenuity, turning river cane into a precision instrument. Building a blowgun started with finding the perfect river cane. Cherokee hunters looked for stalks that grow straight, often reaching 6 to 7 feet. They used heated metal rods to burn and scrape out the interior, creating a perfectly smooth bore. Making a blowgun was like creating a sniper rifle using only plants and fire. Talk about organic weaponry. The darts were miniature works of art. Cherokee hunters carved them from hardwood with sharp points. Animal fur provided stabilization during flight. The effective range was maybe 30 to 50 feet, but the silence was the real advantage. Unlike bows or firearms, blowguns made almost no noise. It was the original stealth weapon, quieter than a ninja and more reliable than your neighbor's leaf blower. Accuracy competitions became popular social events. This kind of precise craftsmanship showed up in many aspects of Cherokee life. Modern ceramic studios have electric wheels spinning clay into perfect shapes. The Cherokee created equally functional and beautiful pottery using nothing but their hands and techniques passed down through generations. Hand-building pottery meant starting with clay and building up. Cherokee potters used coiling techniques, rolling long snakes of clay and spiraling them upward to form pots and bowls. They were basically doing advanced ceramics using the same techniques kids use in art class, except the results actually held water. Cherokee potters mixed local clay with sand, crushed shells, or other materials called temper. Decoration techniques showed real artistic sophistication. Potters used corn cobs, carved wooden paddles, and fingernails to create intricate patterns. They turned household items into art tools. Your grandmother's knitting needles could never compete with a Cherokee potter's fingernails. Firing pottery meant using outdoor pit fires that required considerable skill. Different pottery shapes served specific functions. Large storage jars held preserved foods. Cooking pots distributed heat evenly. But Cherokee artistic expression reached its peak in something even more elaborate. Most people thought of dancing as entertainment. For the Cherokee, dance was their television, library, and newspaper all rolled into one. Through movement and music, Cherokee communities preserved history and taught moral lessons. The stomp dance stood at the center of Cherokee ceremonial life. This wasn't a performance, it was a community ritual where participants became part of storytelling. The dance took place around a central sacred fire. Cherokee dances were like binge-watching your favorite series, except the episodes lasted all night and everyone had to participate. Men led songs and chants. Women wore turtle shell rattles on their legs. These weren't short performances. Stomp dances often lasted through entire nights. The Cherokee invented the all-night dance party centuries before anyone thought to call it that. And theirs actually had educational value. The educational aspect was incredibly sophisticated. Children learned tribal history through exciting participatory experiences that engaged their whole bodies and minds. These ceremonies were just one part of a much deeper approach to healing and wellness. Modern medicine treats symptoms. Cherokee medicine treated people. This was a completely different way of understanding what health meant and how healing happened. Cherokee medicine rested on balance and harmony. Cherokee healers believed illness occurred when someone fell out of proper relationship with spiritual forces. Healing meant restoring relationships, not just eliminating symptoms. Cherokee doctors were basically the original holistic practitioners. They treated your whole life, not just whatever was bothering you that Tuesday. Cherokee healers had identified over 300 native plants for medical purposes. Willow bark for pain relief, echinacea for immune support, ginseng for energy restoration. They had a natural pharmacy that would make any modern health food store jealous, and theirs actually grew in the backyard. Preparation methods varied by condition. Some medicines were teas, others were poultices applied to injuries. Rituals and ceremonies accompanied most treatments. This medical philosophy reflected something even more fundamental about how the Cherokee saw the world around them. While most people see nature as resources to use, the Cherokee saw it as a community of relatives to respect. This practical worldview shaped every aspect of daily life. Every rock, tree, river, and animal possessed its own spiritual essence. Cherokee people weren't just interacting with physical objects, they were engaging with spiritual beings that had their own interests and powers. The Cherokee basically treated nature like one giant neighborhood where everyone deserves respect. Even the rocks had personalities. Little people were small spirit beings living in forests and caves. They could help humans or cause problems for people who behave disrespectfully. These little people were like the ultimate neighborhood watch program. Helpful if you followed the rules, problematic if you didn't. Cherokee hunters understood that animals had spirits requiring proper ceremony. Before hunts, communities held rituals asking permission from animal spirits. This spiritual worldview created some surprising social arrangements that would shock most outsiders. In most societies, women stayed home while men made important decisions. Cherokee women held political power, controlled property, and could decide whether captured enemies lived or died. Cherokee women sat in council meetings and voted on major decisions. The title of beloved woman was earned through exceptional service. These women became among the most powerful people in Cherokee society. Cherokee women had more political power than most women would have for centuries. They were basically running things while other cultures were still debating whether women could think. Beloved women had authority to decide prisoners' fates. They could order executions, demand ransom, or grant mercy. The matrilineal clan system gave Cherokee women control over family property. Cherokee inheritance worked backwards from most places. The women owned everything, and the men just hoped they stayed in good favor. It was like having a built-in system of checks and balances. Women's councils could override male leaders' decisions. But when Cherokee communities needed to settle really serious disputes, they had a method that was both brutal and brilliant. Modern sports have rules and safety equipment. Cherokee stickball had wooden sticks, a leather ball, and virtually no limits on what players could do to each other. This wasn't entertainment, it was warfare. Without weapons. Stickball games involved hundreds of players on fields stretching up to a mile long. The violence was absolutely intentional and completely accepted. Players could tackle and body slam each other in ways that would result in arrests today. Cherokee stickball made modern football look like a gentle game of patty cake, and their players didn't even wear helmets. Stickball served as substitute for actual warfare. When disputes arose over territory or hunting rights, leaders might settle matters through stickball rather than armed conflict. It was like solving international disputes through extreme sports, except people actually agreed to accept the results. Some people literally lost everything they owned on stickball bets. Yet for all this intensity and competition, the Cherokee had an even more profound ritual that reset everything. While most people mark changing seasons with simple observations, the Cherokee created elaborate ceremonies that reset their entire spiritual and social calendar. The green corn ceremony was a complete renewal that gave communities a fresh start every year. The ceremony began with community-wide purification. Participants fasted for days, consuming only special medicinal teas. But here's the radical part. All old food stores were deliberately destroyed before eating the new harvest. The Cherokee basically invented the ultimate spring cleaning. Except they threw away perfectly good food on purpose and called it spiritual. The ceremony centered around lighting a new sacred fire. Forgiveness formed a crucial element. Cherokee people forgave old grudges and settled disputes from the previous year. It was like having a mandatory New Year's resolution that everyone actually followed. Imagine that level of commitment to starting fresh. The green corn ceremony reinforced tribal unity and respect for seasonal cycles that kept Cherokee communities in harmony with their environment. From floating tree trunks to constitutional democracy, the Cherokee proved that innovation, resilience, and community could create something extraordinary, even when the world tried to erase it. They didn't build cities, they didn't leave monuments, but for over a century, they controlled the heart of a continent. The Comanche weren't just survivors, they rewrote the rules of power. So why has almost everything you've heard about them been wrong? There are 15 facts that might change everything. The Comanche tribe emerged as a separate people in the early 1700s, breaking away from the Eastern Shoshone. They called themselves Numenu, which simply means the people. No fancy titles needed. They kept it simple. Originally, these groups lived in the northern Rocky Mountains as part of the larger Shoshone community. Life was good, but it was getting crowded. Resources were becoming harder to find, and young families were looking for new opportunities. It was like choosing between your hometown or moving where jobs ran on four legs. The decision to separate took years of discussion and planning. Some families wanted to stay with the traditional mountain lifestyle, while others were drawn to stories of vast grasslands and huge animal herds to the south. They basically sent scouts instead of checking online reviews. These early explorers found something amazing: endless grasslands filled with buffalo herds so large they stretched beyond the horizon. The soil was rich, water was plentiful, and the climate was more favorable than harsh mountain winters. The timing couldn't have been better. But this southern migration was just the beginning. The real transformation was still coming. Around 1706, the Comanche acquired their first horses through trading and raiding, and everything changed overnight. These weren't just animals. They were freedom, power, and survival combined. The Comanche took to horses like teenagers take to smartphones, quickly and completely. The Spanish tried to keep horses away from native tribes, but that worked about as well as keeping water from flowing downhill. Learning to ride wasn't just about sitting on a horse and hoping for the best. Comanche children started learning horsemanship before they could walk properly. By their teens, they could perform tricks that would make modern circus riders jealous. They basically turned horses into four-legged motorcycles with better gas mileage. The impact on daily life was immediate and dramatic. Hunting became safer and more efficient. Travel that once took weeks now took days. War parties could strike fast and disappear before anyone could respond. But the Comanche didn't just learn to ride, they became master horse breeders. They developed techniques for selecting the best animals and improving their herds. Horse herds became the ultimate measure of wealth and status. This horse revolution made their next lifestyle choice inevitable, and what they chose would shock anyone who believed in staying put. The Comanche rejected permanent settlements completely, choosing instead to live in buffalo hide teepees that could be packed up and moved at a moment's notice. The Comanche invented mobile homes that were waterproof, wind-resistant, and payment-free. Breaking camp was a choreographed performance where everyone knew their role perfectly. Like a pit crew, except instead of changing tires, they packed entire civilizations. A camp of hundreds could be completely packed and moving within hours. They moved faster than most people decide what to watch on streaming. Their movement patterns followed sophisticated seasonal schedules based on buffalo migrations, weather patterns, and resource availability. They knew exactly when to leave each location, which routes to take, and where to set up next. This wasn't wandering. It was precise navigation. The logistics were mind-boggling. They had to transport people, food, tools, weapons, and ceremonial items while maintaining the ability to move quickly. Everything had to be lightweight, durable, and efficiently packed. This constant movement shaped every aspect of their culture, making them adaptable and incredibly skilled at reading the land. But all this mobility served one crucial purpose. The Comanche had a simple philosophy about buffalo: use everything, waste nothing. They turned every single part of these massive animals into something useful. Buffalo meat was processed multiple ways to prevent spoilage. Fresh meat was consumed immediately, but most was dried into jerky for long-term storage. These were their energy bars, except it tasted good and provided real nutrition. They ran the world's first recycling program, turning 2,000-pound animals into complete home sets. The hides were transformed into clothing, shoes, bedding, bags, and teepee covers. Sinew became their thread and rope. Buffalo bones were carved into weapons and household items. The horns were heated, shaped, and polished into cups, spoons, and decorative objects. Even the smallest parts had uses. Bones were ground into powder for making glue and paint. If buffalo had instruction manuals, the Comanche would have found uses for those too. The Comanche even crafted musical instruments from buffalo horns, creating sounds that could be heard across miles of prairie. But getting these valuable resources wasn't simple. Comanche buffalo hunting was a precisely coordinated military operation disguised as a food-gathering expedition. These hunters developed strategies that would impress modern special forces. They had better coordination than most sports teams, except mistakes meant getting trampled instead of losing. Every successful hunt required perfect teamwork and split-second timing. Hunters worked in organized groups with specific roles. They were buffalo psychologists, predicting stampedes at 30 miles per hour. Some positioned themselves to guide the herd's movement, others made the kills, and the rest prevented dangerous stampedes. Their weapons were specially designed for mounted hunting. Short bows could be drawn and fired rapidly while riding at full gallop. They turned hunting into an extreme sport before extreme sports existed. Understanding buffalo behavior was crucial. Experienced hunters could read the mood of an entire herd from subtle signs. They could determine from footprints how many animals were in a group and how long ago they had passed. The actual hunt had to be completed quickly before the herd scattered. This required incredible coordination between riders and years of practice, but buffalo weren't the only targets they pursued. Comanche raiding parties operated like elite military units with one major difference. They were more interested in acquiring horses and supplies than conquering territory. They put more thought into raids than most people put into vacation planning. Planning took weeks of preparation. Leaders studied targets, analyzed routes, and selected warriors based on specific skills. A well-executed Comanche raid was like magic. Horses disappeared and raiders vanished. The preferred attack time was night or early morning when enemies were least alert. They understood that surprise beat any weapon except maybe a really good horse. Their tactics emphasized speed, flexibility, and smart decision-making. If a raid encountered stronger resistance than expected, they would retreat immediately and try a different approach. They never committed to battles they couldn't win quickly. The targets were chosen for practical reasons. The Comanche wanted horses, weapons, and trade goods that would benefit their entire community. These raids also served as training for younger warriors, and all this military success was built on something even more impressive. Comancheria covered over 250,000 square miles across parts of modern-day Texas, Oklahoma, New Mexico, and Colorado. This wasn't just land. It was a complete economic system. They created the first subscription service, except instead of streaming movies, they streamed Great Plains access. The Comanche didn't think about territory in terms of fixed boundaries. They managed more land than most countries, except their capital was wherever they parked. Instead, they viewed Comancheria as a network of resources, seasonal camps, and travel routes. They ran the government without buildings, which probably saved a fortune on office rent. Different bands were responsible for different regions, but they maintained constant contact through messengers, trade networks, and seasonal gatherings. The borders were enforced through presence and reputation rather than walls. Strategic camp locations were chosen for multiple advantages. Sites near rivers provided water. Locations close to buffalo trails offered hunting opportunities. Positions that controlled travel routes gave them leverage in negotiations. For over a century, the Comanche maintained independence over this territory despite pressure from Spanish, Mexican, and American forces. Controlling all this land brought unexpected challenges. The Comanche were master diplomats and traders who maintained complex relationships with numerous tribes, colonial powers, and settlers. They understood that isolation meant weakness, while strategic alliances meant strength. They ran a massive trading company, except headquarters was wherever they camped that week. Trade relationships were essential to their way of life. They had better customer service than modern businesses, mainly because disappointing them meant unpleasant visits. The Comanche needed firearms, metal tools, cloth, and decorative items they couldn't produce themselves. In return, they offered horses, buffalo hides, and safe passage through their territory. They controlled highway tolls, except the highway was thousands of grassland miles. Treaties were viewed differently by the Comanche than by European governments. For them, treaties were flexible arrangements that could be modified if circumstances changed. This practical approach made sense for a mobile society. The practice of taking captives was more complex than it appeared. Many captives were eventually adopted into Comanche families and became full tribal members. Some chose to remain even when opportunities to return home became available. Managing all these relationships required something remarkable. Comanche society operated without kings, presidents, or permanent rulers. Instead, they developed a flexible leadership system where authority was earned through demonstrated skill and success. It was like board meetings, except instead of discussing profits, they decided camp moves and raids. Each band functioned independently with its own leaders and council of elders. These positions weren't inherited. You couldn't inherit leadership like family business. You had to be actually good. Decision-making happened through council discussions where different viewpoints were heard and debated. They had performance reviews, except unsuccessful leaders found themselves talking to empty teepees. The system was remarkably flexible. Different situations called for different types of leadership. A band might follow one person during hunting season, another during military campaigns, and a third during trade negotiations. There was no permanent capital or central government. The Comanche operated more like a confederation of allied groups than a unified state. This made them incredibly difficult for enemies to defeat. Leadership roles often overlapped and changed based on circumstances. This fluid system allowed talented individuals to rise regardless of their background, and one leader would become legendary for reasons nobody expected. During the mid-1800s, a leader named Quanah Parker emerged who would guide the Comanche through their most challenging period. Born around 1845, he represented both traditional Comanche ways and new realities. He was like a military genius who preferred horses over textbooks. His mixed heritage gave him unique insights into both Comanche and American cultures. During the Red River War, he emerged as one of the most effective Comanche military commanders. He understood both sides so well, he could have been a peace negotiator if people preferred talking. His success wasn't based on reckless bravery, but on intelligent strategy. He basically wrote asymmetric warfare books, except in horse tracks and arrow flights. The decision to end armed resistance wasn't made lightly. The buffalo herds were disappearing, the army was getting stronger, and the traditional lifestyle was becoming impossible to maintain. After the fighting ended, he became the primary spokesman during the difficult transition to reservation life. This required different skills than military leadership, negotiation, compromise, and finding ways to preserve culture. His leadership during the reservation period was remarkable. He promoted cattle ranching and supported education while insisting young people also learn traditional customs. But his strength came from something deeper than political skill. Comanche spiritual life wasn't confined to specific times or places. It was woven into every aspect of daily existence. Their religious beliefs provided guidance for everything from hunting to major life decisions. They had direct customer service with the universe, except hold time meant fasting in the wilderness. The Comanche believed in a creator spirit and various forces that influenced the natural world. These weren't distant deities, but active powers that could be communicated with. It was like spiritual retreats, except with rattlesnakes and no food instead of comfortable accommodations. Vision quests were serious spiritual undertakings where individuals would go alone into the wilderness to seek guidance. They basically invented extreme meditation before anyone knew what extreme sports were. Ceremonies marked every significant activity and life event. There were specific rituals for hunting, healing, coming of age, and preparing for war. These weren't just religious observances, but practical preparations. Sacred objects called medicine bundles contained items believed to hold spiritual power. Music and dance were essential elements of spiritual expression. Different songs were associated with different ceremonies, and drums were tools for communicating with the spirit world. These beliefs supported specialists who served their community in unique ways. Comanche medicine men served as the tribe's doctors, spiritual advisors, and keepers of medical knowledge, all in one role. They combined extensive knowledge of herbal remedies with spiritual healing practices. They ran the first holistic health clinics, except waiting rooms were open sky and prescription bottles were buffalo horn. The healing process typically involved both medicine and ceremony. They had better bedside manner than modern doctors, mainly because patients were neighbors and friends. Medicine men possessed detailed knowledge of plants and their properties, understanding which roots, leaves, and bark could treat different conditions. They were like walking medical textbooks, except they memorized everything and never needed lookups. Healing songs were considered as important as the medicines themselves. These songs were believed to have the power to drive away illness and restore health. Each medicine man had his own collection, memorized perfectly. Sweat lodge ceremonies were used for both physical and spiritual cleansing. These were carefully constructed ritual spaces where people could purify themselves of illness and spiritual problems. Dream interpretation was another crucial skill. Medicine men helped people understand the meaning of their dreams and visions, which were believed to contain important messages, but they weren't the only ones with essential skills that kept society running. Comanche women managed the practical infrastructure that kept their mobile society functioning smoothly. They were the engineers, manufacturers, and logistical coordinators who made nomadic life possible. They ran mobile architecture firms, except blueprints were memorized and construction materials were walking around eating grass. Teepee construction required specialized skills that took years to master. They built houses faster than modern construction crews, except their houses could relocate when neighborhoods got boring. Women had to select the right buffalo hides, prepare them properly, and sew them together in patterns that would create waterproof, wind-resistant shelters. They were like interior designers, contractors, and quality control inspectors surviving tornadoes and blizzards. Food processing and preservation was a constant responsibility. Women transformed fresh buffalo meat into jerky, pemmican, and other preserved foods that wouldn't spoil during long travels. Hide preparation was an art form that produced everything from soft clothing to tough containers and ropes. Child rearing involved teaching both practical skills and cultural knowledge. Women played significant roles in family and community decision-making. They were active participants in discussions about camp movements, trade relationships, and military decisions. All this knowledge was preserved through something truly remarkable. The Comanche language belongs to the Uto-Aztecan language family, connecting it to languages spoken across a vast area from the Great Basin to central Mexico. It was like having entire library systems stored in people's heads, except books never got lost, and checkout was permanent. For many generations, Comanche existed only as a spoken language with no written form. They had perfect data backup systems. It was called having children and teaching them everything. All knowledge, stories, laws, and history were preserved in memory and passed down through oral tradition. They were basically human hard drives with better storytelling abilities than most computers. The grammar structure is complex and very different from English. It uses different word orders, includes sounds that don't exist in English, and incorporates tonal elements where voice pitch can change word meanings. Vocabulary reflected their lifestyle and environment with detailed terms for horses, buffalo, weather patterns, and landscape features. The language included rich ceremonial and spiritual vocabulary. Storytelling traditions used the language to preserve history, teach lessons, and entertain during long winter nights. These weren't simple tales, but complex narratives that carried important cultural information. Today, very few people speak Comanche fluently. But this story has a modern chapter that might surprise you. The Comanche Nation today operates from its headquarters in Lawton, Oklahoma, where it functions as a modern tribal government serving thousands of enrolled members across the country. They went from managing buffalo herds to managing budgets, except modern versions involve more paperwork and fewer arrows. The tribal government provides comprehensive services that rival any municipality. They basically run their own country within a country, except with better health care and fewer bureaucratic headaches. They operate housing programs, healthcare facilities, educational services, and social support systems for tribal members. They've mastered government efficiency, which is impressive considering most governments can't fix potholes quickly. Annual cultural events and powwows have become important venues for preserving and sharing Comanche heritage. These gatherings bring together tribal members from across the nation and welcome visitors interested in learning about Comanche culture. Tribal enterprises generate revenue that supports community programs and government operations. The Comanche Nation operates various businesses, including gaming facilities, retail stores, and service companies. Language revitalization has become a critical mission, with specialized programs designed to teach Comanche to younger generations. Youth programs provide opportunities and guidance for young tribal members. The Comanche Nation's success in balancing tradition with modern progress serves as an inspiration for other indigenous communities. From mountain refugees to legendary horsemen, from nomadic hunters to modern leaders, the Comanche story proves that adaptation and strength can triumph over any challenge. Before survival shows made living in the wild look cool, Plains tribes were already experts at it. They didn't just get by, they thrived, turning tough challenges into smart solutions. Ready to find out how they did it? It all comes down to seeing what others missed. Where some saw an endless stretch of grass and sky on the Great Plains, Native Americans saw a world brimming with life, resources, and possibilities, if you knew how to harness them. The Plains tribes didn't conquer this challenging landscape. They learned its rules and played by them. Unlike European settlers who often tried to reshape environments to fit their needs, Plains tribes shaped their lives around what the land offered. This wasn't just clever, it was necessary. You can't argue with nature. You either work with it or it works against you, and nature does not lose arguments. The weather on the plains can change faster than a teenager's mood. One moment, clear skies. The next, a blizzard that freezes everything in sight, or a drought that turns the grass to dust. Without weather apps or forecasting technology, Native Americans became expert readers of nature signs. They observed cloud patterns, animal behavior, and plant cycles to predict what was coming. When a prairie dog colony suddenly went quiet and disappeared underground, people knew severe weather was approaching. If the animals start running for cover, you probably should too. Water, always the most precious resource, required special attention. The major rivers like the Missouri, Arkansas, and Platte were lifelines, but tribes couldn't always stay near them. They developed an uncanny ability to locate underground springs by studying the landscape. Where certain plants grew or where animals gathered often revealed hidden water sources. During droughts, they dug shallow wells in dried riverbeds where water still flowed beneath the surface. Some tribes even created small dams to collect and preserve rainwater. Meanwhile, today we panic if we can't find bottled water within 5 minutes of getting thirsty. Their homes perfectly reflected this adaptive mindset. The iconic teepee was essentially the world's first mobile home, designed for nomadic tribes who followed buffalo herds. Made from buffalo hides stretched over wooden poles, a teepee could be set up or taken down in less than an hour. Try moving out of an apartment that fast. Its conical shape brilliantly deflected harsh winds, while adjustable flaps controlled ventilation and smoke release. During winter, they added inner linings for insulation, creating a warm pocket of air between layers. In summer, the bottom edges could be rolled up to create a cooling breeze. So basically, they figured out air conditioning and central heating without even knowing what those were. For more settled agricultural tribes like the Mandan and Pawnee, earth lodges provided extraordinary protection from the plains' extreme temperatures. These semi-subterranean homes used the Earth's natural insulation properties. In winter, they stayed warm despite howling winds and sub-zero temperatures. In summer, they remained cool when outside temperatures soared above 100 degrees. One Mandan Earth Lodge could house up to 40 people, an entire extended family, with designated areas for sleeping, cooking, and storage. Modern families struggle to agree on a thermostat setting. Imagine 40 people trying to share the same space. Fire management wasn't just about keeping warm. Plains tribes conducted controlled burns that prevented massive wildfires and promoted new grass growth that attracted buffalo. They understood what forest managers today call fire ecology, centuries before it became scientific practice. By burning small areas intentionally, they created natural fire breaks that protected their camps and hunting grounds from lightning spark conflagrations that could otherwise race across the prairie faster than a horse could run. Perhaps the most important adaptation was their flexibility itself. When drought struck one region, tribes moved to areas with better resources. When winter approached, they sought sheltered valleys. This nomadic lifestyle wasn't primitive, it was sophisticated risk management. They traveled light, carrying only essential possessions and knowledge in their heads rather than in heavy books or furniture. No moving trucks, no storage units, just efficiency. This adaptability extended to their social structures too. Leadership often shifted based on need. The best hunter might lead during buffalo season, while the most experienced warrior took charge during conflicts. This fluid approach to organizing their society allowed plains tribes to respond quickly to changing conditions. If you weren't getting results, someone else took over. Imagine that. The plains might look empty to untrained eyes, but Native Americans recognized it as a land of abundance if you knew where to look and how to live. Their greatest skill wasn't fighting the environment, but becoming part of it. And central to this way of life was one magnificent creature that provided nearly everything they needed: the buffalo. These massive beasts roamed the grasslands in herds so vast they blackened the horizon. Early European explorers reported seeing buffalo herds that stretched for over 25 miles, containing millions of animals moving as one flowing mass across the prairie. Basically, rush hour traffic, but with hooves and less road rage. But having millions of buffalo around didn't mean they were easy to catch. Before horses arrived, hunting these one-ton animals required incredible bravery and ingenuity. Tribes developed several hunting methods that turned their physical disadvantages into strategic advantages. The most dramatic technique was the buffalo jump. Hunters would carefully herd buffalo toward a hidden cliff, then suddenly spook them into a panicked run. Once the front animals started falling, the momentum of the herd pushed others over the edge. At the base of Montana's famous head-smashed-in buffalo jump, archaeologists found bone deposits nearly 40 feet deep, representing thousands of years of hunts. That name alone tells you everything you need to know. Another method required even more coordination: the surround. Hunters would form a human circle around a small group of buffalo, gradually tightening the ring while wearing wolf skins to confuse the animals. When close enough, they would launch their arrows simultaneously. One wrong move meant risking not just failure, but death under the hooves of frightened buffalo. Let's be honest, trampled by buffalo is not the way anyone wants to go. The real work began after the hunt. While today's shoppers might grab packaged meat from a store, Plains tribes transformed every single part of the buffalo into something useful. Nothing, absolutely nothing, went to waste. The meat, of course, provided essential protein. A single adult buffalo yielded around 400 pounds of usable meat, enough to feed a family for weeks. Women quickly cut the meat into thin strips that could be dried in the sun or over slow fires. Some of this dried meat was pulverized and mixed with melted fat and berries to create pemmican, essentially the world's first energy bar. Packed with calories and nutrients, pemmican could last for years without spoiling. That's right, a snack with no expiration date. Good luck finding that at the grocery store. The tribe treated hides with a mixture that included the animal's own brain tissue. This brain tanning process created soft, water-resistant leather perfect for clothing, moccasins, and teepee covers. A skilled woman could process up to 40 hides each year. One average-sized teepee required the hides of at least 10 to 14 buffalo, all sewn together with sinew, a dried tendon from the same animals. The bones became tools and utensils, shoulder blades turned into hoes for farming, ribs became sledges for hauling goods, and thigh bones transformed into hammers and hide scrapers. Even the hooves weren't wasted. They contained collagen that, when boiled, produced a powerful glue used for binding weapons and tools. Hair from the buffalo's shaggy head and shoulders became rope and stuffing for pillows. The thick woolly mats shed each spring insulated winter moccasins or padded baby carriers. The tough rawhide from the neck skin created virtually indestructible containers, shields, and drum covers. If you wanted something built to last, you used buffalo hide, not that flimsy plastic stuff that cracks after a year. Even the animal's organs found purpose. Stomachs became water containers capable of holding several gallons, bladders stored medicines, and intestines were cleaned and dried to store rendered fat. The gallbladder's bitter bile was mixed with clay to create yellow paint. Most impressive was how Plains tribes maintained this bounty. They practiced sustainable hunting centuries before sustainability became a buzzword. Tribal elders and religious leaders enforced strict rules about when and how many buffalo could be killed. Hunters were taught to target specific animals based on the herd's health, typically avoiding pregnant females and young bulls needed for breeding. These practices kept buffalo populations stable for thousands of years, until European market hunters arrived with industrial-scale hunting methods that nearly wiped out all 30 million Plains buffalo in just a few decades. By 1889, fewer than 1,000 buffalo remained from the massive herds that once dominated the landscape. That's like turning a thriving city into a ghost town practically overnight. For Plains tribes, the buffalo wasn't just a resource, it was a relative. Many origin stories describe humans and buffalo as kindred spirits, with the buffalo willingly sacrificing itself to provide for the people. This spiritual connection reinforced respectful hunting practices and ceremonial thankfulness for each animal taken. The bond between Plains tribes and the buffalo was unshakable, but their survival depended on more than just the hunt. To truly thrive, they needed something even more valuable than food: strong communities and adaptable traditions that could withstand change. This reverence for the buffalo reflected a deeper understanding. Their lives and the buffalo's were completely intertwined. But another animal would soon arrive that would dramatically transform how they hunted the buffalo and lived on the plains. Life on the Great Plains changed forever when horses galloped back into North America. Yes, back. Horses actually evolved on this continent millions of years ago before disappearing. When Spanish explorers reintroduced them in the 1500s, they had no idea they were launching one of history's most remarkable cultural transformations. The first Plains tribes to acquire horses in the early 1600s gained an advantage that spread like wildfire. Horses escaped or were stolen from Spanish settlements, passing from tribe to tribe across the Southwest and eventually reaching the northern plains. What started as a trickle became a flood of horses moving northward, completely reshaping Plains life within just a few generations. Before horses, hunting buffalo required elaborate planning, large groups, and dangerous close-range attacks. A single hunting trip might take weeks, with hunters crawling through grass on their stomachs for hours to get close enough for a shot. Success rates were low and the risk of injury high. Basically, buffalo hunting was the original extreme sport: high risk, high reward, and no safety gear. But horses changed everything. On horseback, hunters could keep pace with a running buffalo herd. They could position themselves alongside their target, right in the sweet spot near the animal's heart and lungs. A skilled mounted hunter could take down multiple buffalo in a single hunt, accomplishing in hours what previously took days or weeks. The transformation wasn't instant, though. Wild horses weren't just waiting to be ridden. Plains tribes developed sophisticated methods for capturing and training these powerful animals. Young men would track wild herds for days, identifying the leaders and understanding their patterns. When the time was right, they would separate younger horses from the herd, then begin a gentle breaking process. Rather than using force to break a horse's spirit, many Plains horsemen used patience and gradual desensitization. They might tie a wild horse to a stake, gradually introducing it to human touch, voice, and eventually weight on its back. The goal wasn't just obedience, but partnership. A well-trained Plains horse would respond to knee pressure and weight shifts, leaving the rider's hands free for weapons. Because when you're hunting buffalo or dodging arrows, you don't have time for a horse with trust issues. The most elite horses received special training for buffalo hunting and warfare. These animals learned to maintain a steady pace alongside running buffalo, to dodge charging enemies, and even to shield their riders in battle. Some war horses were trained to bite and kick enemy horses and riders, becoming weapons themselves. Nothing says battle-ready like a horse that knows how to throw a punch. The riding skills developed by Plains tribes astonished European observers. Children as young as 5 years old began riding, often starting with specially trained gentle horses. By their teen years, many young riders could perform feats that would make modern rodeo stars jealous. They could shoot arrows accurately while hanging from the side of a galloping horse, using the animal's body as a shield. Others could leap from one running horse to another or scoop a small object from the ground at full gallop. Meanwhile, most of us still struggle with parallel parking. The horse revolution created new hunting techniques. The surround method evolved into a dynamic moving circle of mounted hunters who could keep pace with fleeing buffalo. The charge became popular, a thundering pursuit where skilled riders separated individual animals from the herd. In warfare, horses enabled lightning raids against enemies hundreds of miles away. A mounted war party could travel up to 70 miles in a single day, 4 times farther than on foot. They could strike quickly and escape before enemies could organize a response. This created both new opportunities and new dangers, as all tribes gained these capabilities and raiding became more common. Horses quickly became the most valuable possession on the plains. A single high-quality war horse might be worth 10 regular horses or several guns. The Comanche tribe, in particular, became legendary horse masters, building herds of thousands and developing breeding programs that selected for speed, endurance, and temperament. By the mid-1700s, the average Comanche family owned between 4 and 15 horses, while wealthy leaders might own hundreds. That's right, being a horse tycoon was the original flex. The desire for more horses created a complex economy of raiding and trading. Young men proved their worth by stealing horses from rival tribes or Mexican settlements, sometimes traveling hundreds of miles on dangerous missions. Success brought not just wealth, but status and respect. Tribes adapted their material culture to accommodate their new 4-legged partners. They created specialized saddles, bridles, and decorative gear. Women developed distinctive beaded or quilled horse decorations that identified their tribe from a distance. Special bags designed to hang from saddles carried essentials for long journeys. The horse so completely transformed Plains culture that within a few generations, tribes couldn't imagine life without them. Origin stories were retroactively modified to include horses as gifts from the Creator. There's a Lakota word for horse that means sacred dog, reflecting how they understood this new animal in relation to their faithful old companions. Dogs had been man's best friend for centuries, but when horses showed up, it was like getting an upgrade to the deluxe model. This revolutionary change transformed life on the plains in ways that extended far beyond hunting. As horses carried people and goods across vast distances, new possibilities emerged that would reshape tribal relationships and power dynamics across the grasslands. Plains tribes operated one of history's most successful cashless economies, creating vast trading networks that stretched across the continent long before credit cards or digital payments existed. No hidden fees, no interest rates, and definitely no surprise bank overdraft charges, just good old-fashioned barter. At the heart of this system was a simple principle. Everything had value if someone else wanted it. Buffalo robes served as something like the standard currency. A well-prepared winter robe might fetch you a good knife, several clay pots, or a substantial amount of corn. The highest quality robes, often decorated with intricate quill work or beading, commanded premium prices. For larger purchases like horses, multiple robes bundled together provided the necessary value. The absence of money didn't mean a lack of sophistication. Plains traders developed complex value scales that everyone understood. Among some northern tribes, one healthy adult horse equaled approximately 10 good buffalo robes, which equaled 2 functional guns with ammunition, which equaled 20 large dressed deerskins. If you think mental math at the grocery store is hard, try bartering for a horse using a conversion chart in your head. Trading sessions followed important protocols that mixed business with diplomacy. They often began with gift exchanges and ceremonial smoking to establish goodwill. Unlike modern transactions where we rush through checkout lines, plains trading required patience and social finesse. Traders might spend hours telling stories and building relationships before serious bargaining began. The process wasn't just about acquiring goods, it was about strengthening bonds between different groups. It was less grab and go and more chat and negotiate. When language barriers existed, tribes developed clever solutions. Silent trading allowed groups with different languages or historical tensions to trade safely. Items would be placed on the ground, then one group would retreat while the other approached to examine the offerings. They might add or remove items to adjust the proposal, then back away again. This back and forth continued until both sides were satisfied, usually signaled by taking the offered goods and departing. Essentially, it was the world's first take-it-or-leave-it online marketplace, but with a bit more suspense. Trading centers emerged at the crossroads of tribal territories. The most famous was at the confluence of the Missouri and Yellowstone rivers, where Hidatsa, Mandan, and Arikara farmers maintained a trading hub that attracted tribes from hundreds of miles away. Each summer, nomadic tribes would arrive with buffalo products, horses, and other goods to exchange for corn, squash, beans, and manufactured items. These gatherings could last weeks, featuring not just trade, but also ceremonies, marriages, and knowledge exchange. Picture a farmer's market, a stock exchange, and a family reunion all rolled into one. The variety of goods that moved through these networks was staggering. From the Southwest came turquoise, pottery, and cotton textiles. Great Lakes tribes provided copper and wild rice. The Pacific Northwest contributed shells, wooden boxes, and dried salmon. The agricultural tribes of the Eastern Plains offered corn, tobacco, and decorated pottery. Even goods from European settlers eventually worked their way into these networks, with beads, metal tools, and textiles becoming highly valued trade items. Flint and obsidian for making tools traveled particularly far. Chemical analysis of stone tools found at plains sites reveals materials sourced from hundreds of miles away. Knife River flint from North Dakota has been found as far away as the Gulf Coast, evidence of just how extensive these trading networks were. The most valuable trade wasn't always in physical goods, but in knowledge and technology. New hunting techniques, medical treatments, and spiritual practices spread along the same routes as material goods. When horses arrived in the South, knowledge about training and riding them traveled north faster than the actual animals did. It was like downloading the software update before the hardware arrived. Trading relationships often ensured peace between otherwise competitive groups. The Mandan and Hidatsa farming tribes maintained peaceful relations with nomadic hunters like the Crow and Cheyenne because their mutual trading partnerships benefited everyone. The Mandan exchanged their agricultural surplus for buffalo products, while the nomadic tribes gained access to foods they couldn't produce while following the herds. Unlike our modern economy with its booms and busts, the Plains trading system remained remarkably stable for centuries. With no banks, no interest rates, and no speculation, the focus stayed on the practical exchange of valuable goods. Nobody went into debt because you could only trade what you actually had. Market crashes simply didn't happen. Plains tribes understood that wealth came from what you could share, not what you could hoard. Successful traders gained prestige not by accumulating goods, but by distributing them generously to family and community members. This circulation kept goods moving and prevented dangerous concentrations of wealth or power. It turns out the best investment strategy was generosity. The trading gatherings offered more than economic benefits. They became opportunities for young people to find spouses from other tribes, for healers to exchange medical knowledge, and for everyone to catch up on news from distant regions. In a world without the internet or newspapers, these face-to-face meetings were essential information exchanges. Forget social media. If you wanted the latest news, you had to show up, trade a buffalo robe, and listen. The success of this economy depended entirely on trust and strong community bonds. Without written contracts or enforcement agencies, people relied on reputation and relationships to ensure fair dealing. This approach worked because the tribes understood something fundamental. The strength of Plains tribes came not from armies or buildings, but from how they organized their communities. Survival demanded teamwork, and their social structures turned this necessity into an advantage. Unlike societies that relied on rigid hierarchies or massive fortifications, Plains tribes built their strength through adaptability, cooperation, and shared responsibility. Tribes organized into bands of 50 to 200 people, large enough to hunt and defend themselves, yet small enough to pack up and move before anyone started complaining about too many meetings. Unlike European monarchs, Plains chiefs didn't inherit power or sit on golden thrones. They earned their positions through wisdom, generosity, and skill. Leadership was often split between peace chiefs for daily governance and war chiefs for conflicts. One handled negotiations, the other handled battle strategies, like having a CEO and a head of security rolled into one system. The chief makes a suggestion and the people do as they please, goes an old Comanche saying. Important decisions required consensus through council meetings where all respected adults could speak. Though sometimes lengthy, this approach ensured everyone felt heard and committed to the final plan. No surprise decrees, no royal proclamations, just a lot of discussion and some very patient listeners. Children learned through observation and gradual participation in adult activities. By their early teens, most had mastered essential survival skills. No need for adulting courses. By the time they were teenagers, they could track animals, tan hides, and navigate open plains better than most GPS systems. Elders held special status as living libraries of knowledge in societies without written records. Their wisdom guided everything from hunting techniques to resolving disputes, ensuring that knowledge passed down generations rather than disappearing. Justice operated without prisons or written laws. Community pressure and the threat of losing status kept order. Compensation resolved minor disputes, while serious offenses might lead to banishment. No long court trials, no endless paperwork, just swift, fair consequences that kept the community functioning smoothly. Family structures extended far beyond the nuclear family. Children called their mother's sisters mother and father's brothers father, with all taking parental responsibility. Aunts and uncles weren't just extended family, they were extra parents. Even enemies captured in warfare could be incorporated through adoption. Instead of eternal grudges, there was the possibility of a fresh start, proof that even the fiercest rivals could one day be family. The Plains tribes didn't just survive, they thrived through ingenious adaptation. Their story isn't about primitive people struggling against nature, but sophisticated societies working with it. From buffalo hunting to social structures, they created sustainable ways of life perfectly matched to their homeland, leaving lessons we can still learn from today.